Prime Minister Abhisit, thank you for making time for us on Bloomberg Television. I first want to talk about the financial conditions in Thailand right now. The baht completed its fourth weekly loss, the worst losing streak since June, with investors selling off Thai stocks right now after protests once again in the streets of Bangkok. What assurances can you give for investors to keep their money in Thailand who are fed up with the constant protests?
Well, I'm not sure that the outflow is directly related to the protests. I think there's been a general fear of inflation in Asia and in the region. And in a way, it's a correction from what we've seen over the last few months, where the baht has gained very strongly and also the stock market has gone very high.
I will address inflation in just a few minutes, but first I just want to highlight the protests that are taking place in the streets of Bangkok. Investors looking at the political turmoil still coming off those deadly protests that we saw last spring. What assurances can you give those that want to put their money in Thailand that these protests will not continuously happen?
Well, first of all, I think people will have witnessed that the Thai economy has been very resilient. Despite the economic crisis on the global level and also the protests in the streets over the last few years, we have been able to register an 8% growth. And whatever differences there are on the political side, there have been very little criticisms or differences as far as the approach we take to economic policy. So that's one reassurance. The second thing that I should point out is that we've just lifted the state of emergency in all the provinces, barring the 3 provinces in the south, where actually we've lifted the state of emergency in 1 district. And there are protests, of course, but these are the exercise of constitutional rights. But so far, they've been peaceful. They've been exercised in a way that does not disrupt what is going on in the country. And I feel that this is an election year. I think all the parties are now focused on the upcoming elections. So I think there will be continued stability.
Tell me how you feel about the People's Alliance for Democracy, the so-called yellow shirts that have been taking to the streets this week. And many say that the yellow shirts are the ones that help you rise to Prime Minister. What about their grievances over this border dispute with Cambodia? Do you think it's less about this border dispute and more a way to try to kick the government out of office?
Well, the PAD has been very focused on the Thai-Cambodia relations and also the border issues. So it's very much at the moment a very single issue protest. Obviously, their dissatisfaction with perhaps some of the things that we are doing to resolve the problem is now led to their calls for perhaps a resignation and so on. But I think the majority of people will look at the issue on its merit. And I think on the whole, what the government has done has been to protect the interests of the country, of our people, while at the same time able to keep the peace and also good relations with our neighbors. And I think that should be the objective of our policy.
Prime Minister, you said this week that you would call an election as early as April. Why not wait till your term expires?
Because I think there had been calls that an election would be one way to resolve some of the differences and some of the outstanding problems that we have. My position has always been that we would call elections when the conditions are right, and I think we've now have a very strong economic recovery underway. The momentum is there, so it wouldn't be disrupted by an election. We've just completed the 2nd reading of the constitutional amendments, and the 3rd reading would be complete on February the 11th. And therefore, we will have rules that all political parties now agree as far as going to the polls is concerned. And if we can preserve stability, despite the fact that we've lifted the states of emergency and no longer use special laws, I think it will be a good time for the country to return power to the people.
What makes you so confident that you can win this vote when right now it seems that you don't have the support of the yellow shirts?
Well, you know, we're looking at the polls. The government is slightly ahead. We cannot take it for granted that the elections would be results would be one way or another. But I think what's good for the country is we have free, fair elections soon. And the Democrat Party in the government is ready to fight those elections.
Okay, what about the demands from the red shirts, the ones that took to the streets last spring? You know, a key demand during those protests was that there would be a reduction of power from the conservative elite in Thailand, something that you've been accused of not doing. Do you believe that this is necessary for Thailand, and to what degree?
Well, the elections themselves would be a partial, if not a complete answer to those grievances. And I feel that once the elections are done, I think the red shirts will have to admit that we have gone through a round of a democratic process, and therefore whoever wins the election should have the right to govern.
What about the concern about rising food prices right now, Prime Minister? Obviously, this has been discussed at Davos as well. And some would say for Thailand, it actually presents an opportunity and also a challenge. I mean, what measures are you considering right now to keep food prices in check?
Well, I think we need a fair deal for farmers and consumers alike. I think on the whole, the prices have been able to increase the majority of our people's income, particularly those in the farm sector. What we try to do is to make sure that prices are stable enough for consumers. A lot of groups are actually going to get pay rise, and at the same time, our central bank is very much focused on price stability. So I think we are managing that balance between making sure that the farmers should benefit from higher prices and at the same time protect the consumers as best we can.
Well, as the world's top rice exporter, investors are wondering if you're planning to maybe increase your domestic stockpiles, meaning that Thailand's going to keep more of its rice at home rather than exporting less of it to the world.
No, I don't think we need any kind of export restriction for the moment. I think our stocks are sufficient, and I think we should continue to benefit from the world market.
And what about concerns about seeing rice riots once again with the soaring cost of food right now? Any concerns for this year?
With what? I'm sorry?
Rice riots, as we saw just a few years ago with the soaring price of food. Are there any concerns right now with commodity, especially food commodities, getting higher and higher, more pricey? Do you think we'll see an escalation once again this year?
No, I don't think we would see those kinds of disruptions. Obviously, we need to manage the situation so that the inflation or high prices do not disrupt the economic recovery and does not destroy consumer confidence. I think so far, consumer expenditures have held up well. And I think that's partly because a lot of our people are agricultural producers, and they also benefit from high prices.
Now, let's talk about the economic conditions taking place in Thailand, just raising benchmark interest rates by 25 basis points earlier on this month and signaling that further tightening is ahead. What about the growth forecast for Thailand, looking at maybe 4.5% GDP growth for 2011 with higher interest rates? Do you think that's at risk?
Well, I think inevitably there's going to be a slowdown from an over 8% growth last year. I think that is widely accepted. And a growth rate of around 4%. I think the estimates now run from something like 3.5 to 4.5. I think it's acceptable. I think it's enough to make sure that we sustain the level of employment, while at the same time it's not too inflationary.
Now, Prime Minister, you have said that you might be calling early elections in April. What would have to happen for you to derail those plans?
Well, I haven't actually put in a definite date, but as I said, once the constitutional amendments are finished, and if there is no censure motion, because if there is a censure motion submitted to Parliament, obviously we have to deal with that motion first. And if there is relative calm and stability, I think the elections would be possible.